Welcome to General Governmental Budget Committee, and this meeting is now called in session. I want to welcome everybody here, and I think we need to go around the room. It shouldn't take very long, and say what your name is and where you represent. And if you have some other thing you want to say, you're obviously welcome to say it. But so that we all, and then we're going to go through staff. So could we start with Representative?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Mike Amix. I represent the 45th District in Lawrence, Kansas, and Douglas County, Kansas. Part of my district includes the city of Lecompton, the territorial capital of the great state of Kansas.
Bill Riley, Wellington, Kansas, south of Wichita, Kansas, south part of Cali County, south part of Sumner County. I would not have been able to know that I was in the right room if I wouldn't have been with Representative Amix over here. He is the stable part of this committee.
I'm Representative Lynn Melton. I represent District 36, which is the western part of Wyandotte County across the street from the Speedway and Sporting KC.
I'm Representative Sandy Picker from District 88, which is southeast Wichita, and I have 4 square miles in Butler County. So,
thank you, Madam Chair. Chip Van Houten, District 26, Spring Hill and South Olathe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Casey Harbison from District 89, which is primarily northeast Wichita. Think of it as Wichita State University. I have all the area, Coke Industries. That's all me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm Representative Adam Turk out of the 117th District. I live in Shawnee, Kansas, the city, not the county. Western Johnson County and Central Douglas County.
And just to round it out, I'm Barb Bossinger, and my district is Hayes in Victoria, Kansas. So the smallest geographic district in Western Kansas, because most other people have multiple counties, and I just have 2 cities. So, and now I'd like staff to introduce themselves. Do we want to, who wants to be the first guinea pig?
Good afternoon, committee. I am Jessie. I'm an assistant revisor with the Revisor of Statutes Office, so I'm here for any bill drafting services or legal questions.
Hi, my name is Jacob Klesby. I'm a legislative fellow with KRD.
Hello, my name's Chloe Pavlik. I'm an AV technician. I'll basically just be streaming all the videos.
Julia Kofoid with Legislative Research. I'm also a fellow.
Kelly Humphreys, I'm the committee assistant.
Hi, my name is Molly Pratt. I am a fiscal analyst with the Legislative Research Department, and I will be acting as the facilitator for the committee this session.
Thank you. Well, thanks for all being here. If we didn't have Chloe doing this, we wouldn't be in compliance with COMA and CORA, so thank you. And staff is what makes this really roll. So make sure you know that you can contact whether it's Molly or Jessie, because whatever questions you have, they will be able to help you. Okay? They're here to help us. You can be mad at them when they don't answer you exactly the way it's supposed to be. I'm teasing. In your packet, you will find rules for our committee. Every committee will have the exact same rules. This was asked for by the speaker, and it makes a lot of sense. When I first came, every committee had different rules. So I encourage you to look through them, but we will, as chair, I'm allowed to say that these are the rules of my committee. And so if you have any questions, please let me know. I will give you any information you need to. Also, before I go on to bill introductions, I want to apologize to committee. I was delayed at Ways and Means and Appropriations meeting and did not get to the floor in time should have made alternate arrangements to change our meeting to 9 a.m. tomorrow morning instead of 3:30 in the afternoon. And we can't because I wasn't there. I didn't have it announced on the floor. So we do have a meeting tomorrow, and most all the budget committees will be meeting tomorrow afternoon at 3:30. So you won't be here by yourself, and I will be here, but I want to apologize because I did contact the speaker's office the day before, just didn't follow through. So that I take full responsibility for that. If you can't be here, you got to let me know. I need to have a quorum in order to vote. I need at least 5 people to vote on our recommendations to the budget. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does that include also us participating through Zoom tomorrow by chance? Does that qualify as
look-
5? Is that?
I'm sorry, I didn't address you. Representative Hobson, we were told that unless you're in the room, you may not vote. Yes.
Are we voting tomorrow? Is that my understanding, or we're just hearing recommendations tomorrow?
We're doing both.
Both, okay.
This weekend, because I am the very first person to present at appropriations on Tuesday morning at 9. We do not have the leisure of saying, well, let's just decide on Monday and we'll look at it over the weekend. We can't. We're going to have to do it. So, there's something else I was going to say. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to shoot any spitballs at me for screwing up with tomorrow? Okay, then for tomorrow. Okay, Molly just gave me a note that said she'll send an updated calendar for the next few weeks. We are on a very short timeline. The speaker wants to be done in 90 days. And probably a month ago, we sat down and figured out what we would need to do to get done and get it to appropriations. And then when appropriations gave us this, when we have to come in with our recommendations, it sped it up even more. So I know it seems like it's fast and furious, but buckle up, we're going to have to do it, okay? Representative Amix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just in another budget meeting before this one, and we actually took action on an item that we heard at the same meeting.
Good. I think they're all going to have to do it.
Okay, would that be a possibility today if we don't have the numbers that you need for quorum tomorrow? And I don't know.
Okay, here's my question, Jesse, if you could go on the. Molly, would we can't move on tomorrow's before I'm telling you this was not well planned by me. So can you tell them what you just said?
Yes. Hi, this is Molly Pratt with Legislative Research. Today, the committee will be hearing the budgets of the Office of Administrative Hearings and the Judicial Council and taking action on those 2 budgets. Tomorrow, the Board of Tax Appeals and I believe the Department of Revenue are scheduled to have their budgets heard by the committee. For voting purposes, I'll let Jesse explain.
Sure. So yes, today, the budgets that are being heard today, there is going to be a recommendation vote today on those items heard. But since there are 2 budget hearings tomorrow, you can't vote ahead of those budget meetings, but action is possible on those that are heard in the same day.
Okay. Thank you, Representative. I appreciate everyone sticking with their jobs. Right now, I'm going to ask for bill introductions. Are there any bill introductions? I'm not seeing any, then we'll keep going. We have a informational piece called Budget Basics. Molly, did you want to go over those briefly? I think you need to go to them. Thank you.
All right. Hi, members of the committee, and Chairman Wassinger. Before you, you should have I'm sorry, I'm Molly Pratt, fiscal analyst with the Legislative Research Department. Before you, you should have a document from the Legislative Research Department titled Budget Basics. If you don't, I have extra copies that we can provide to you. This document essentially explains the budgeting process for the entire state government. The first step is to understand where an agency obtains its money. There are normally 3 categories: the state general fund. The principal source of revenue for the state general fund is taxes, including individual and corporate income taxes, sales taxes, and interest earnings. Revenue from the state general fund is used to finance governmental operations not provided for by other funds. State special revenue funds include agency fee funds, which consist of receipts collected and retained by an agency. Some state special revenue funds are shared between multiple agencies. The revenue sources for these funds are largely from special fees, fines, or levies assessed by the state. And finally, federal funds are similar to state special revenue funds. They're largely obtained from fees, fines, or levies assessed by the federal government. The next step for the budget process is to understand how an agency spends its money. An expenditure is an actual payment of money out of any state or federal fund. Classifications for goods and services purchased by state agencies can be broken down into several categories. Salaries and wages expenditures include payment to state officers and employees for their work and the state's cost for employee fringe benefits. On the next page, you'll find the description for contractual services, which include a large variety of payments for various services, including communications, travel, utilities, and consultant services. Commodities are consumable materials, supplies, and parts used in the operation of the agency, including stationery, cleaning supplies, and fuel. And capital outlay is for items having a normal life of 1 or more year, including office equipment, machinery, furniture, and vehicles.
Pardon me, thank you, Molly. I would prefer that you not read it. So if you could just, if anyone has a question, you can go back and explain it to them, but they have it in front of them.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Yes. The other categories of expenditures include aid to local governments, assistance, grants, benefits, and capital improvements. All of these are combined into an agency's base budget, and that is the level of expenditures that the agency needs to maintain the current level of operations. The division of budget will normally include like cost indices, which are factored into the base budget for agencies to account for things like inflation. And finally, the last section details the various budget versions. As I'm sure you've all heard, this is a slightly new budget process this year. The Legislative Research Department prepared all of the analysis for agencies like we normally do. However, the legislative process started a bit earlier in that the Special Committee on Legislative Budget reviewed all agency requests for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026, and then made recommendations based on the agency's request. And that bill was introduced, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday in the House. And my understanding is that the adjustments that this committee makes and the House Appropriations Committee makes will be changed in that House budget bill, rather than the governor's budget bill, which is introduced every year also. Are there any questions?
Not seeing any. I think you did a good job. Thank you very much, Molly. If anyone has a question in between at any time, we can go back to it because you have it in your packet and we know what we're going to have to do. All right. We're going to start with budget hearings. We'll open our budget hearings with the Office of Administrative Hearings. Tell us about it is our fearless Molly Pratt.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Walsinger and members of the committee. Once again, my name is Molly Pratt. I am with the Kansas Legislative Research Department, and I will be presenting the budget request for the Office of Administrative Hearings. With or in the committee room today is the acting executive director, Lauren Snell. They may be able to provide additional information to the committee. So the Office of Administrative Hearings conduct efficient, fair, and impartial hearings for constituents and other affected parties who contest actions of state agencies that determine their legal rights. The office also resolves other disputes lawfully referred to the administrative hearings by governmental entities. The Office of Administrative Hearings is funded a bit different than most other agencies in that their budget is entirely off budget. They receive their funds from other state agencies, and the bottom of page 1 details how that funding mechanism works. The OAH establishes a budget for the upcoming fiscal year that provides the funds required for the agency to provide hearing services. The budgeted amount is then divided among 6 state agencies that utilize the agency's services the most, and this is based on a 3-year average. Those agencies are the Kansas Department for Children and Families, Department of Health and Environment, Kansas Department of Labor, Department of Health and Environment, Healthcare Finance, Department for Aging and Disability Services, and the Kansas Civil Service Board. The agency fee is divided by 4, and each agency makes a quarterly payment to the OAH. In fiscal year 2024, the fee ranged from $445,000 for the Civil Service Board to a little under $850,000 for the Department for Children and Families. The 6 agencies also pay direct hearing costs, and other state agencies or governmental entities pay an hourly rate plus direct hearing cost. The current hourly rate ranges from $100 to $115. Are there any questions?
Not seeing any. You can go ahead.
On page 3, you will find the fiscal year 2025 analysis. I should have noted during the Budget 101 process that these budget summaries are a bit different than last year's, and that they begin with the amount approved by the 2024 legislature for the agency to expend in fiscal year 2025. So both fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026 will be compared to the amount already approved for fiscal year 2025. If you have any questions, just let me know. It's kind of confusing. The agency did not reappropriate any SGF funds because they are not SGF funded, and the agency also does not include any supplemental requests in their budget. Item 3 details the employee pay. The request includes a decrease of about $55,000, all from the Administrative Hearings Office funds from the previously approved amount. Although the 2024 legislature approved a salary increase for most state employees, including administrative law judges, there are vacant permanent positions within the agency, though these are partially offset by an increase in wages for temporary employees. Item 4 on page 4 reviews the agency's request for a decrease of about $24,000 from the previously approved amount for fringe benefits. The reduction in funds is due to a decrease in employer contributions for benefits such as group health insurance and employee retirement. And finally, the revised request includes several minor shifts throughout categories of expenditures. However, those changes do not yield any monetary changes. To illustrate, the agency decreased expenditures for communication services by $2,200 and increased the total expenditures for computers, office furniture, and office supplies by the same amount in fiscal year 2025. Does the committee have any questions on fiscal year 2025? Okay, I will continue on to fiscal year 2026, which begins on page 5. Similar to fiscal year 2025, the agency's request does not include any enhancement requests. Item 2 includes a decrease of about $55,000 from the Administrative Hearings Office Fund below the fiscal year 2025 approved amount for salaries and wages for fiscal year 2026. There are vacant permanent positions within the agency that are partially offset by an increase in wages for temporary employees, just like fiscal year 2025. And item 3 on page 6 discusses the decrease of fringe benefits by about $12,500. The reduction in funds is due to a decrease in employer contributions for benefits such as group health insurance. And finally, the agency's request includes a decrease of $344, all from the Administrative Hearings Office Fund. Similar to the revised estimate in the previous year, there are several minor shifts throughout categories. The agency's request includes an overall increase of about $800 for office supplies and an overall increase of about $300 for computer equipment and furniture. These amounts are offset by an overall decrease of about $1,400 in contractual services, specifically for job-related trainings and operational charges for state buildings and other communication costs. Does the committee have any questions about fiscal year 2026?
Not seeing any. I'd like to point out not to want to point you out as a freshman, these are much more legible for us than they have been previously in the legislature. One of the things it has on here and will on every single budget that we go to, it will make a note of what the Legislative Budget Committee did, and that's what LBC means. I'm kind of a stickler about acronyms, so if I use one and I don't explain what that means, stop me, because I know that this place is all code. So you just have to have, stop and tell someone. But LBC is the new budget program that we started, that they got the budget together for the legislature prior to session. So, okay, thank you.
Chairman Wassinger, I do have one other page to note. Page 7 includes a reference table. It just explains it just analyzes the 10-year expenditure history for the agency. And with that, I'm finished presenting the budget summary for the Office of Administrative Hearings. And if there are no additional questions, I will leave it up to the chair.
Don't see any. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So from my point from previous years, a couple things for the freshmen, just while you're looking at this budget, is where and Molly did an awesome job of going over and discussing this, but just to bring it down into common language, that where you see the where it says SGF, those funds are typically the funds that we get from tax money that comes in, where the all funds is all those tax monies plus monies that we get from outside sources that it's a large number, but that's why they call it all funds rather than just our general funds. Does that make sense? And so I really appreciate, Madam Chair, that research has got this last page that Molly just brought out here, the 10-year expenditure history. And I know we're trying to move this really quick, but in the past, I really would, for future times, I would like to see a 10-year chart on the breakdown for the salaries of each one of these departments. Just from past experience, knowing what the FTEs, full-time employees are, isn't always a good indicator. I would rather see the actual breakdown of salaries each year and the actual breakdown of wages, which is, one is for administrative people, one is for hourly people for the last 10 years, so we can see the actual money that's spent on wages and salaries. And for each one of those, that includes benefits too. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, I have asked for them. You asked me via text or email, but it was just too late to get everything together the way you wanted it, but they were more than happy to do that and work on that. So, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you, Molly. Next, we're going to hear from Lawrence Snell. Am I correct? Did I say this correctly? Yes. Yes, I just met him yesterday, so that was great. And he apologized for spelling my name wrong everywhere, but I don't see it wrong anywhere. So you go for it. Thanks for being here. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to come, and I know there's a number of you that I have actually been here before, because even though I am the acting director, I am apparently the longest acting director in any agency within the state, but that's okay. I'm comfortable with it at this point. I've embraced it, and we're just going to move forward and continue to do good things over at the Office of Administrative Hearings. Titles don't mean a whole lot to me. What matters to me is that we're actually achieving what our mission is and our vision for the office, and we seem to be doing that at this point. A couple of things, and I can go through, I know that there's new members on this committee, and this is different for me because the last couple of years I came in and everybody knew everything about what we had done, and so I didn't really have to go into a whole lot of detail. I'm happy to go into as much detail as you like, but I tried to spit all that out in the written testimony, which is where, if you look at the written testimony, it's over here. That's where the chair's name is misspelled. But I did get it corrected on what was distributed electronically because I felt horrible about it. Yes, ma'am.
So is that at their desks right now or not? Okay. Is this it?
So the written testimony, it comes on Office of Administrative Hearings letterhead.
Okay.
It's going to be like this. You should have 3
Got it.
documents.
Thank you. Yes. That's okay. Thank you. And as an aside where we are, everything's going to be sent to you electronically. I do not anticipate always printing things out for you unless you specifically ask for it. Okay, you can also print things out on your own, but if you want to have all the papers here for you during the meeting, you need to tell Kelly so that she knows exactly that. Okay, all right. Give us a brief overview, and when we have questions, we can ask, because I'm new on the committee as well.
All right. So the Office of Administrative Hearings is responsible for conducting hearings for individuals who have been subjected to actions taken by governmental entities in some way, shape, or form, whether that be an agency of the state, whether that be a different governmental agency. For instance, we had cases a couple of years ago that involved now former employees of Emporia State University. We handle cases for the universities, Title IX cases. We handle special education cases for school districts that have had issues with regards to whether or not they are complying with the education requirements that are required by the federal government. But primarily what we do is the cases that we hear on behalf of constituents of the state where there has been an action taken by the government against them in some way, shape, or form. You heard that our primary caseload involves the Department for Children and Families. There are a number of case types that we handle for the Department for Children and Families. We handle what we call YPS cases, or Youth Protective Services, which are cases where there's been an allegation and a substantiation that there's been some sort of abuse, neglect, or exploitation committed against a child. We also do adult abuse cases that are handled by the Department for Children and Families. We handle if there's been a change as relates to their benefits that they receive through food assistance or cash assistance or even child care assistance programs. If there's been a change that is detrimental to that individual, they have the right to appeal that. That comes to our office, and it's our responsibility to then hear the facts and make a decision as to whether or not the agency has acted appropriately. Now, in the past, prior to us becoming official 20 years ago, they handled this all internally within the agency. So the agency would receive that, then the agency would hear the evidence presented, and then the secretary of the agency would then render a decision as to whether or not the agency did what they were supposed to. 20 years ago, actually it was more than 20 years ago, it became official 20 years ago, the idea was to separate that from the agencies to create the appearance of independence, so that the agency wasn't responsible for going in and making sure that the agency was doing what the agency was supposed to, and then leaving it up to that agency to make that determination as to whether or not that had happened. And so we created this panel, which is our office, of hearing officers or administrative law judges, and that's what we do. We hear the facts, we make the determination, and we submit it to the individual in the agency. And of course, we are not the last say. They do have additional steps that they can take in the process. They have the right to appeal it, depending upon the type of case. Ultimately, it can go as high as the Supreme Court because it can go through the district court and the Court of Appeals up to the Supreme Court. But that's what we do in a nutshell. We also handle all licensing. So if anybody here is a licensed teacher, pharmacist, nurse, doctor, dentist, optometrist, if there is a discipline that's taken against somebody who's licensed as a professional within the state of Kansas and their license is to be disciplined, we also work with the various boards of those agencies to assist them in the hearing process to ensure that whatever discipline is being taken in accordance with the laws of the state of Kansas as well. The overarching idea is that we just want to ensure that individuals within the state are receiving due process when it comes to having actions taken against them that might impact them in some way, shape, or form that could be negative to them in some way, shape, or form. And we currently contract with somewhere, depending upon the year, it's about 34 to 37 agencies throughout the state that we contract with. Some of those are required by statute. Some of them, as I mentioned before, such as Kansas State University and University of Kansas, they've come to us to ask us to be a part of that process so that they have the ability to have those hearings done by individuals who are students of the law and have ideally learned what needs to be learned in order to be able to dole out due process in those particular cases. That makes us unique, and we talked about this the last couple of years. This will delve me into the budget, and that is we handle a lot of different cases. There are other administrative law judges within the state that are designated to specific agencies, and it's not to discount what they do by any stretch of the imagination, but they are limited as far as what they handle. For instance, we have individuals who do workers' comp. That's primarily what they do, if not all of that they do. And that's great, and it's very important work that they do. My judges have to be able to educate themselves and make decisions with regards to different types of law based upon the agency and then based upon what action was taken by that agency in that particular case. And as you might imagine, it requires that they have to be good students of the law. They have to make sure that they are aware of what we do, how we do it, and what each agency that appears before them does as well. And so we have made a point in the last couple of years of trying to do what we could from a salary standpoint to ensure that we were able to hire and retain good judges. Because the concern was we were having judges who were applying to go to the district court or other areas. And so you get somebody that was trained in how to do this, and then all of a sudden we're losing them and they're going someplace else because they're able to make more money. And it makes sense. I completely understand it. I don't think any of us would disagree. That's a pretty good incentive. But at the same time, it makes it difficult for us as an agency when we're trying to retain. And so 2 years ago, this committee actually helped to spearhead a change that helped us increase the salaries. And so when you look at our budget from fiscal year 24, fiscal year 25, there was a substantial increase that took place, and those that were part of this committee in those 2 years know that that actually originated out of this committee. The help of Representative Hoffman helped with his assistance, and this committee, we were able to get that moved through, and that increased our salaries to the point that we were at least able to be compared with other administrative law judges in the state. Because at that point, we were making substantially less. We had some that were making nearly $40,000 a year less than what other administrative law judges. And so this helped with that, but that also is, and I bring it up because that is the primary line item on our budget. And that is the measure by which we have to look at our success is, are we able to, based upon the fact that we've had this increase in salaries, have we been able to turn that into productivity? And I would like to think that we have, and I think the numbers demonstrate that. We've had an increase in the number of cases we've had an increase in the number of cases that have been being filed with our office, which to me demonstrates that there's a confidence with our office as far as what we're doing. Because that's not only cases based upon agencies that have to, but it's also the fact that we've been able to work with additional agencies outside of those that are required by statute to work with us. and get them to utilize our services as well. And they don't necessarily, they aren't bound to do that, but they've chosen to do so. In addition, we're also completing those cases. I've provided an annual report, which is something that is brand new this year. It's a step that I took, and there's actually a couple more steps that we'll be taking in the coming years. The first is to develop an annual report. I wanted to create transparency. I wanted for not just you who get to hear these facts and figures on an annual basis, but I wanted everybody to be able to go out and look and see exactly what it is that we do as an office. And so we created an annual report so that we have that available to be able to show what we're doing, how we're doing it, what the results are, where this money's going, and is it accomplishing the tasks that we had hoped that it would be accomplishing. Now, it's first year, so it's hard for me to say for sure. I don't have anything to compare it to other than past facts and figures, but we're hoping to be able to utilize that moving forward to be able to make sure that we're showing that to folks that, yes, we are in fact accomplishing what we set out to accomplish. And then the other thing we hope to be doing is we're going to redesign our webpage. And I actually will attribute a lot of this to Representative Riley, because he has been the one who has been kind of spearheading the make sure you're getting this information that's going to be important that we can actually go out and make a decision on. And we had many discussions last year with regards to this. And so I went back and looked at our webpage and realized I wasn't responsible for it. It was done before me, a couple of directors before me. So I know that kind of sounds like I'm pushing it off, and I guess I kind of am, but at the same time, it was my responsibility to do something with it and make it so that it was worthwhile. And we're in the process of doing that. I've already sent off the web design to our people who maintain our website for us, and we're going to create more transparency. And we're going to have a lot more information that's available not only to you, but also to the folks that are interested in what we do as an agency. So I would guess at this point, what I would do is stand open for questions. I think I've given you at least a brief umbrella of what we do, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have that might not be answered by the documents.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Representative Turk.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will say, I remember this budget from last year, and I remember last year too, you were an interim director, and man, you've been there a hot minute as an interim. What is the holdup with that?
I'm not sure, but at this point, I would rather talk to you off the record as opposed to talking
Okay.
on the record with
Okay.
regards to it. 'Cause
Well,
like I say,
listen, I think you're doing
Perhaps you
an
two can
excellent,
get together.
I think you're doing an excellent job, and I think,
appreciate that.
I think your agency looks great. Can you tell me the average length of time your staff, I'm looking at your staff, you got 1 director, 6 administrative law judges, 2 public service administrators, 4 legal assistants, and an administrative specialist. What's the average length of time that your staff has been with you?
So we have had a little bit of staff turnover in the 2.5 years now because I have been the acting director since May of 2022. We had a couple of staff changes that we had to make with regards to administrative staff, not with regards to judges. The judges that I have in staff, they've all been with us since prior to 2022, and then except for one that we added at the end of 2022. And they have been doing remarkable. And I mentioned the whole idea that they were looking elsewhere. I actually had judges that were applying for district court positions, on the hopes of possibly getting there. And I can tell you that since fiscal year 20, or since the 2024 or 2023 legislative session, we've not had anybody apply to go to a district court position, and I'm proud of that because it means that we have continuity within the office, and we have folks that are wanting to do the work that we do and are more than happy to stick around. And so we've had longevity at this point. We are going to have somebody retiring who's been with the office, been doing this job for 36 years. She was doing it back when they were still with the other agency, and she has come to us. She came over with the central panel. And she is retiring in October. We're sad to see her go, but we appreciate the years and years and years of service that she's given to us.
Does that answer your question, Representative?
Yes, thank you. Comparable pay was a big issue with so many agencies last year in this committee, and we worked real hard to help wherever we could, and your agency was one of them. I'm glad to see that you've got some longevity and your staff is stable, and you guys are pumping out some good numbers, and I commend you.
On behalf of my staff, I would say that they are very thankful for the work that was done the last 2 years. Not just the administrative law judges who were the primary benefactors of that, but also the legal assistants, because they appreciate the fact that they've been able to continue the relationships that they'd already fostered with those individuals.
All right. Any other questions? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two things. I just want to say thank you very much for what you've done as far as answering what originally, this is on the testimony on the budget. This was originally set up as frequently asked questions that I had put out, and so if you're wondering where all these questions came from, it was from a couple years worth of work, and did a fantastic job of answering these questions. So if someone was really trying to delve into what was going on here, it'd be great. And then as far as your one page front and back of you that you have here, as far as looking at performance-based budgeting, I mean, that's something that all of the budget committees have been trying to get a handle on for probably 10 years. And I was doing a whole lot of harping about that on some of the agencies last year, and I'm hoping that some of our agencies, when they come forward to talk to us, they will do as good of job of following through on this performance-based budgeting so that you can see what your goal is, where you're at, how you're doing it. Awesome job here, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Riley. I appreciate that.
He's going to hold you to the fire. I know this man. He came in with me. I know exactly what he's going to do. Does anyone else have any questions? You have a motion? Is that what you said? Representative Amix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would, there's no other questions. I would concur with the recommendation of the LBC and approving the 2025 and 2026 budget for the Office of Administrative Hearings.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Representative Amix to approve the recommendations as given. And we have a second from Representative Riley. Is there any questions? Are there any questions? That's incorrect English. Are there any questions, and does anyone want to say anything? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Good job. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Snell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
Okay. We did start, I will tell the committee that we did start with budgets that aren't really SGF, that are a little bit easier to, so we could kind of slide into the year and figure out what our job is going to be. And because we're going to be working hot and heavy on these. So thank you. Then we can welcome back Molly Pratt to discuss Judicial Council.
May I proceed?
Yes, please do.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rossinger and members of the committee. Once again, my name is Molly Pratt, and I am with the Legislative Research Department. With me today is the Executive Director for the Judicial Council, Ms. Nancy Strauss, and she will likely be available to provide any more information that the committee would deem necessary. The Judicial Council was created by the 1927 Legislature. The 10-member council creates committees to study the administration of justice in Kansas and to make recommendations as to how the administration of justice can be improved. The council currently has 14 advisory committees and 2 ad hoc committees made up of legislators, judges, attorneys, and persons from various backgrounds who bring their expertise to the committees. On page 2, well, actually, the bottom of page 1 and the beginning of page 2 details a few of those committees that have been established within the past few years. And the bottom of page 2 details some of the other duties of the agency. The agency receives and considers suggestions related to the administration of justice in Kansas from the legislature, the Supreme Court, other courts, the state bar, and the public. Not only does the agency provide hundreds of legal forms to the public on its website, but it also authors and distributes 5 publications that cover a variety of legal topics. And those publications are listed on the bottom of page 2, but they are also mentioned in the fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026 analyses. Speaking of which, if you will turn to page 3, you'll find the analysis for fiscal year 2025. The 2025 legislature approved about $821,000 for the agency, all from the state general fund. This request includes $733,000, which is approximately $88,000 less than the approved amount. Item 1 details the SGF reappropriation. The agency carried over $67,922 in unspent state general fund monies into fiscal year 2025. This is due to a reduction in printing and communication expenses, as well as a decrease in the number of advisory committees held in person. For fiscal year 2025, the agency is not requesting any supplemental funding. And item 3 actually deletes the reappropriation for the agency. So you will see that there is a decrease of the same reappropriation amount. That is item 4 in the chart. Item 3 in the chart. The agency lapsed the reappropriated SGF monies because of a reduction in printing and communication expenses that was not previously anticipated. And once again, the agency expects some committee meetings will be conducted via Zoom rather than in person. Item 4 includes a decrease of about 28,000 SGF below the approved amount, due primarily to the agency selling and distributing fewer legal publications than in years past. A portion of the reduction is also due to lower printing costs than the agency anticipated. In fiscal year 2025, the Judicial Council will distribute a 2024 supplemental edition of the Kansas Municipal Court Manual, probate forms, pattern instructions for Kansas Civil, and pattern instructions for Kansas Criminal. Number 5 includes a decrease of about $7,000 SGF below the approved amount for in-state travel. Once again, this is due to fewer meetings being conducted in person than previously anticipated. Item 6 includes a decrease of about $3,000 below the approved amount for salaries and wages. The decrease is primarily due to fewer committee members electing to receive their per diem payment. However, the reduction is partially offset by increases in employer contributions for fringe benefits. Item 7 includes an increase of about $9,700 above the approved amount for other contractual services due to necessary computer software maintenance and programming. And finally, item 8 on page 5 includes an increase of about $7,500 above the approved amount for office and IT supplies. The increase in expenditures is associated with a rise in cost of stationery and office supplies, as well as the agency's need for additional computer equipment. And I will be happy to stand for questions if there are any.
All right, questions, Representative Amix.
Madam Chair, Molly, just so that I understand this, and this will be not only this budget, but future budget. The reappropriation of the 67,922, is it in or out?
Madam Chair, the reappropriation is not included. The agency lapsed it.
I will also note that you'll find that in most agencies that the Legislative Budget Committee asked that we not approve any reappropriation. And a reappropriation is, they got the money last year, they didn't spend it. The thought is that they obviously didn't need it. So are we going to keep giving it to them? So that's where we're starting right now, from what I've been told. Yes, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I only bring that up because I wanted to make sure that we weren't, in the middle of a year trying to do a project and that maybe we were taking bids or whatever it may be. I just wanted to make sure that I understood in this particular budget and future budgets. And I appreciate your explanation as
Yes.
to whether or not it was in or out on this.
Well, the LBC's been really looking at them, and if it has to do with a project that's not done, they've allowed the reappropriation. So if you're halfway through, you bid it out and you haven't spent the money, they've anticipated that they will keep that and then be able to finish a project.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Thank you for your explanation.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other questions? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Molly, looking at this document right here, shall I wait till the folks come up and talk? This is the.
Yes, I believe that's for,
Yeah. Wait for the.
that's for Nancy to come,
I have a question on
Ms. Strauss, come up. Thank you, Molly. I appreciate it. Oh, did you want to go to 2026? You didn't finish that? We probably should.
Okay.
We go through that.
All right. The analysis for fiscal year 2026 begins on page 6. The agency's request does not include any enhancement funding for fiscal year 2026. Item 2 details a decrease of about $37,000 SGF below the fiscal year 2025 approved amount, due primarily to the agency selling and distributing fewer legal publications than in years past. In fiscal year 2025, the agency plans to print approximately 2,000 units of 4 publications. Those were mentioned, I believe, on page 4. In fiscal year 2026, the agency will only distribute 2 publications, meaning the number of units printed will drop by more than half. Additionally, a portion of the reduction is due to lower printing cost from the state printer than the agency anticipated. Item 3 on page 7 details a decrease of about $6,000 SGF below the fiscal year 2025 approved amount for in-state travel. Once again, this is due to the agency's belief that more committee meetings will be held online than in person. Item 4 discusses an increase of about $11,000 or $10,950 SGF for contractual services. This is due to necessary computer software maintenance and programming, as well as other contractual services. It is partially offset by a decrease in dues for subscriptions. The budget analysis or summary states for services like Westlaw, but that is also for services like it used to be called the Harvard's News Report, the State Journal. I can't remember the new name for it, but yes, and a decrease in expenditures for outside professional services. Item 5 includes an increase of about $6,600 above the fiscal year approved amount, or fiscal year 2025 approved amount. This is associated with a rise in cost of stationery and other office supplies and additional computer equipment. And finally, item 6 includes an increase of $2,015 SGF above the fiscal year 2025 approved amount for salaries and wages. The increase is related to greater employer contributions for group health insurance and the public employees retirement system. However, it is offset by a decrease in expenditures relative to the fiscal year 2025 approved amount due to the agency's anticipation that not every committee member will elect to receive their per diem. And finally, page 8, once again, covers an overview of the past 10-year expenditures for the agency. You will note that up until fiscal year 2024, the agency was fee-funded. They were switched to the State General Fund. I believe it was during the 2023 legislative session, and they were fully SGF funded in fiscal year 2024. And with that, I will be happy to stand for questions.
Okay. One thing I'd like you to make sure that we clarify is give me an example of an enhancement.
Yes. I'll try to stick to the same realm of area of government. So an enhancement request, one of the agencies I'm assigned to review the budget of is the Board of Indigent Defense Services. For fiscal year 2026, they are requesting, I believe, approximately $6 million for assigned counsel payments and other other payments for public defenders. It's called out as, I'm sorry,
Enhancing their own budgets.
it's called out as an enhancement because it is
Above
a
and beyond what
dramatic,
they
I don't want
normally
to say a
have.
dramatic, but yes,
Okay.
increase.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think this part I can talk about. So just for the people that are seeing us spinning through this really quick. So on the 2026 budget, you look at page 6, 7, and 8 there, and if you look at what the agency was requesting on each one of those items, 2 through 7, I think it is, that on some things, they were deleting some things, and then some things they were adding, requesting adding. And so, but the difference between the 2025 budget and the 2026 budget, you know, if you were to, I didn't mathematically go through this with my calculator, you know, they're adding and subtracting, but the bottom line was, as Molly said, on the 25, they were sitting at $732,941 for their total budget. And now add and subtract things. Now they're asking, doing an all funds budget request for $730,000, which is less, net less. And so they're actually asking for less money, even though, you know, we're bouncing up and down on those numbers. They're actually asking for less total budget. And, you know, I've never been an administrative department chair, and sometimes they move money around from one little place to the next little place. So whether they really and truly end up, you know, deleting 36,000 for this or that, or publishing costs, who knows? But the net is that 26 budget is a little less.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
Madam Chair, if I may, I did think of another example that might help clarify.
I think does anyone need it clarified? I think we understand. I just wanted to go
Okay.
briefly. Thank you, Molly. Thank you. All right. Great job. Wonderful. So now we'll call on Nancy Strauss, Executive Director of the Judicial Council, to go through her testimony. Welcome to committee. You can pull it all the way down. I know, those of us have a little bit of short disadvantage, we understand. Yes.
I'm Nancy Strauss. I'm the Executive Director of the Judicial Council. I'm going to try not to duplicate too much of what Molly said about our agency, but we're a very small agency, and what we do is not really reflected in our name at all. So, and a lot of you are new, so I want to give you a better understanding of what we are doing so that you can also better understand our budget and our performance measures. So, like Molly said, it's in 2 years, it's going to be 100 years since the legislature created our agency. And we are independent, even though we are placed in the judicial branch of our state government, but we are independent from everyone else who's from the entire court system. So we operate independently, have our own, obviously submit our own budget, have our own personnel plan, all of that. We're not under the administrative authority of the courts. So Molly touched on our advisory committees, of which we currently have 14. Even though we have a small staff, those advisory committees add more than 100 more people that are doing work for the Judicial Council. There's a list in our handout of the current advisory committees, and then the council directs and oversees that work. So these advisory committees perform our statutory mission to improve the administration of justice. There's several things that these committees do. I'm going to talk about 4 major categories. And I also want to point out that even though there's 14 committees, they don't all meet all the time. The committees only meet when they have an assignment. So a committee that's perhaps is, for example, might be the author of one of our publications that's published annually. They meet every year, but another committee might only meet if it gets an assignment from the council. So you can see that we're projecting to have around 70 total meetings in the current fiscal year and 26, and that breaks down to about 55 full committee meetings and then 14 subcommittees. So the first category of things that the committees work on is we conduct studies that are requested by the legislature, the courts, other entities. And so to give you an example of what that means, every year there are legislators that request studies from the Judicial Council. And then that might be, it's often a bill that maybe got a lot of opposition when it was heard. And the council has the ability to bring all the stakeholders together and try to find a compromise or at least areas of agreement. An example of how that process serves the legislature and Kansas citizens is the work that recently came out of our Civil Asset Forfeiture Advisory Committee. Multiple bills have been introduced over at least the last decade attempting to reform the civil asset system in Kansas, and none of those bills ever passed. But an asset forfeiture reform bill was finally passed last year, and it was based almost entirely on our advisory committee's recommendations. And that bill ultimately passed 120-0 in the House and 35-0 in the Senate. And each study that is assigned to an advisory committee will result in a written report to the Judicial Council, and we track those reports as an outcome measure in our performance-based budget. The second major category is drafting legal forms. The council has drafted hundreds of legal forms that are provided at no cost on our website. There's a list on page 3 of our handout of some of the kinds of forms that are available. Some of the forms are required by statute. For example, in 612713 says something like, the forms used under the Small Claims Act shall be set forth by the Judicial Council. So we draft those forms and make them available. Other forms are created for the bar and for attorneys and judges. We have a huge set of forms that are used in child in need of care cases. However, some of those are required by Supreme Court Rule 174 that requires the use of Judicial Council forms for certain orders in sync cases. And over 50 of our order and journal entry forms in that area of law fall under that rule. A growing category of forms on our website have been drafted with an intended audience of self-represented litigants. In her State of the Judiciary address yesterday, Chief Justice Lukert spoke about the justice gap and the high number of Kansas citizens who are trying to represent themselves in court because they can't afford an attorney. The Judicial Council began creating legal forms for self-represented litigants over 20 years ago, beginning with the protection from abuse forms that were distributed and put on our website in 2002. In 2009, the council first posted divorce forms, which are one of our most popular, unfortunately, set of forms for self-represented litigants. Those forms have been modified and improved many times over the years, and they are very user-friendly. Now, more recently, our Civil Code Advisory Committee has been collaborating with the Supreme Court's Access to Justice Committee to create more forms and improve existing forms to make them available for self-represented litigants, along with accompanying a packet with easy-to-understand step-by-step instructions of how to conduct their case. We also created a specific website forms advisory committee at the Judicial Council so that we have one committee looking over all the forms for accuracy, consistency, and getting them up on the website as fast as possible. Formerly, we had to wait. The Judicial Council body had to approve everything before it went up, and they only meet twice a year. So there were delays in getting those forms available to the public. So the third category is the books that Molly talked about. There are 5 legal publications that includes the 2 pattern instruction books and those jury instructions that we draft are used in all civil and criminal jury trials in the state. Those books, all the 5 books that we sell are primarily intended for judges and attorneys. Although law enforcement agencies are frequent purchasers of the criminal jury instructions because it sets out the elements they have to prove for each crime. And finally, the last category is the council has been involved in drafting statutory codes since the very early years. You know, long before there were advisory committees, the original Judicial Council members worked for several years on drafting a brand new probate code. And a list of some of the codes that have been drafted by the Judicial Council over the years is on page 2 of our handout. Our advisory committees currently, periodically suggest amendments or even complete overhauls and updates of statutory codes that are relevant to their area of expertise. This session, we will be requesting introduction of a new uniform law that has to do with guardianship. And our Guardianship and Conservatorship Advisory Committee has been working on that for about 4 years now. So with all of that background about what we're doing, I want to shift a little bit to a discussion of our budget. Our budget's fairly simple since everything is under one program. And our request, as Molly told you, is for 26 is $730,028. That's approximately 85% salaries and wages. And the rest is normal operating expenses to hold the necessary meetings and produce the books that we sell. For example, a publication-related expense would be, there's like $30,000 for travel in there. You might want to look at the 406, 410 that was attached to our materials is a little easier for me to understand than the one with all of the red ink, because that's not really clear to me what happened there. But so there's $30,000 in our 26 budget for travel. That is for our committee members. The statute entitles all of our committee members to receive subsistence and per diem. So that's where some of that comes in. And there's also costs that are directly tied to the production of the books that we sell. So this might go to what you were commenting on, Representative Riley, about our 26 budget being less than the 25. You'll see a lot of up and down from one year to the next in our budget request and in our performance measures related to publications. That is because we don't publish all 5 books every year. So next year, or for the 26 year, we're only publishing 2 books, so the printing costs will be lower, so it's less than 2025. That's an explanation for that. And I also, I wanted to point out that we had actual expenses that it might seem like a big jump from our actuals in 24 to the request in 25, but actually 721,000 was approved in 2024, and the part that didn't get spent, we just sent it right back to SGF. And another thing that I want you to understand that's not obvious from anything that's in front of you is that the total request for 25 and 26 is offset, our ask for SGF is offset by the fact that approximately 380 some thousand dollars in revenue for the sales of our books goes back to SGF, goes directly to SGF for each of those years. So I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you have.
Are there any questions? I want to point out that the Legislative Budget Committee did not ask for any changes. Even though that says that in all of these, it doesn't mean that we can't, that we want changes. Representative Turk.
Thank you, Chairwoman. 2 years ago, my first year, when we voted to switch you off fee funds and put you on SGF, it was a very instructional opportunity for me. I learned a lot. And we were watching how it was becoming more and more difficult for you to operate. And we had an opportunity to learn what your agency does. I'm looking at all these numbers, and I'm pleased that with this transition, you guys are being great stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And as you mentioned, your proceeds for the books go back to SGF, and you're pivoting and changing with the times. And there are many agencies that we will see moving forward that are behind the curveball. And I'm looking at this and I'm seeing where you're right on top of it, and it's slightly ahead, I would say, in several categories. So I'm going to say that I'm looking at this in 3 years now. I'm seeing this, and I'm pleased. I'm grateful. So if nobody else has any questions, I would move to pass out the Judicial Council's budget for fiscal years 25 and 26.
There's a motion on the table from Representative Turk. There's a second from Representative Riley. Is there any discussion? The only discussion I have is it suddenly dawned on me, were you the one that the governor said, oh yes, she is standing? Was that you that was up in?
It was not, but it's probably.
It could be very close. I thought, oh, that could have happened. Could have been. Okay, if there are no questions, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. The only thing I have left for today is I wanted to point out that you were given a sheet that says when we're going to hear from, it gives you the date of when we're having, and I took the wrong one, I think. I did. It looks like this, that it's not in there. Did you mail it? You mail it out to everyone? Okay. I'm going to have Molly get that out to everyone. She made a form that said the date that we have the meeting and the date that I have to report out. So you will understand why I'm pushing this along, because I don't have time to do it in a few days. Okay. Are there any other questions for the committee? If not, our meeting's adjourned.